YouTube is a spectacular place. It houses some of the most creative and intriguing people in the world. And just like the internet in general, anything you want to watch can more than likely be found on YouTube in some form or another.
Pink lettuce.
Pink lettuce. For next week's...
And one of the main topics I like to watch on the platform is video games. I love watching live streams, reviews, documentaries and all sorts relating to the medium. This is one of my favourite pastimes behind playing video games themselves, and one of the first content creators I ever watched was a man simply known as Jedi1. I discovered his channel around 2007 and his style was very guerrilla, amateur and incredibly unprofessional. He was just a normal guy ranting and raving about video games to his webcam for thousands of people to see. And he had quite a following within the gaming community, at least on YouTube anyway. One of his earlier videos came in the form of crappy games, where he would pick a video game he didn't particularly like and basically just talk shit about it for 5 to 10 minutes.
This game is just a piece of shit. Look how slow your character moves, look at this shit. I fucking died already. What the fuck is this shit? Fucking shit. And I fucking fall right in. And I can't fucking crouch to kill the fucking dragon either. He didn't even touch me. I mean, fuck. This is one of the worst wrestling games I've ever played in my life. Who in the fuck designed this game? Was it like kindergartners or something, or first graders? I mean, look at these graphics. I've seen NES games that look better than this shit.
Oh god, the quality of these videos are much worse than I remember. Oh, these have not aged very well at all. Anyway, some of the comments of these videos came in the form of ridicule, often lambasting him for acting like a big child and not very nice in general, but there was one comment that I frequently noticed, that being people saying that he was trying to copy the Nintendo nerd or the angry Nintendo nerd. And curiously, I decided to look up and see who this Nintendo nerd was. Well, it was at this point I noticed the nerd's videos were much better put together, and it was clear he put a lot of work into his reviews. The comparison to him was clearly the fact he would get angry at games he found particularly garbage, often swearing at the games themselves in a comedic fashion.
Oh, that's how. Make it look like shit and give it the most inexcusably god-awful controls that gaming technology could allow.
But unlike Jedi1's channel, the nerd had a better editing style, especially towards later content. It was here I gradually stopped watching Jedi's videos and leaned more over to the nerd's content. Jedi no longer has a YouTube channel, but some of his videos still live on through other sources today, so you can still see some of his content if you look for him on YouTube. They're incredibly dated now, but it's a nice piece of internet history, where you didn't get paid to make videos, there were no sponsorships or need to make a Patreon account, for example. It was just you, your webcam and your opinions. Fast forward to a few years later, and the nerd, officially known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, has amassed a huge following amongst the community and is now one of the most respected content creators on YouTube today. The Angry Video Game Nerd has been around since 2004, but I didn't discover him until 2007, and ever since then he's been one of my favourite content creators of all time. If it wasn't for the Angry Video Game Nerd, I probably wouldn't be making YouTube videos today. He is a major inspiration to me even having a YouTube channel in the first place. Yeah, I know I said that Jedi was an inspiration first, but it was the AVGN that was the reason I discovered how to edit my content in later episodes. It wasn't until the making of an AVGN episode where I learned new methods on how to put a video together, and is ultimately one of the reasons I got better at editing my content. With popularity and fame comes merchandise, and AVGN has a plethora of it. He has his own movie, figurines, and even video video games. There were a handful of unofficial fan-made video games which he covered himself, but the first official AVGN video game was created in 2013, and it ended up getting a sequel 3 years later, as well as a remastered deluxe edition comprising both games in 2019, and was ultimately released on PC and all modern consoles. I'll be taking a look at the deluxe edition of AVGN I and II, since these are supposedly the definitive versions of these games. So if this is your first time here, then welcome to GB Reviews. This is episode 22, and I'm Dave talking to you on GB Gaming, where video games come first. Obviously, I'm going to start off by taking a look at the first installment. This is the Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures. It was originally developed by Freak Zone Games and published by Screw Attack Entertainment, and was released in September 2013. I'll be specifically taking a look at the remastered version that was released as part of the AVGN I and II Deluxe bundle, released in 2019. A few things were changed and optimised, but as a whole, it's still the same game. The basic premise is that the nerd and his friends are minding their own business playing video games when suddenly an unknown entity drags everyone into another dimension. The nerd thinks he has escaped when out of nowhere he's grabbed by the balls and dragged off himself. We are introduced to Gameland, which is a world composed of everything that the nerd has criticised in his reviews over the years. Basically, he has been transported into a shitty game. Each level is themed after a different genre or game, mostly 8-bit titles, and the gameplay is fairly similar to that of the Mega Man series. Even the invisible blocks make their appearance in this one. It's a 2D retro-inspired platformer where you make your way to the end of the stage, avoiding all sorts of hazards and obstacles, which get gradually more ridiculous as the game progresses. I'm not kidding. This game puts your concentration and patience to the ultimate test. You start the game by going through a very brief tutorial which explains all the basic controls. Once you beat the tutorial level, you are brought to the level select screen, which shows the aforementioned Gameland. As I said, each level is a parody of past nerd episodes, with some being a lampoon of entire games, including Castlevania, Street Fighter 2010, and even the company LJN, which he jokingly calls
"Welcome to our team of laughing, joking numbnuts."
Throughout your playthrough, you will notice the nerd commenting on almost everything he encounters within the game in the form of text dialogue at the bottom of the screen, mostly referring to times where he may have said the very same thing in one of his videos. There are so many references in this game, it would be hard for me to point out all of them, but your best bet is to experience it for yourself. But I will say there were a few of them that got a good chuckle out of me. Of course, like many games today, there are collectibles. Once you find a collectible, the statistic for how many you have will begin showing up on the level select screen. So upon beginning the game, you will not know what collectibles there are until you encounter one for the first time. For example, I discovered Future Nerd in one of the levels, and once I was back at the level select screen, it showed which other levels he specifically appears in. As you play, you'll eventually unlock more characters to play as, including Kyle Justin, which comes in the form of the guitar guy behind the couch, taking his skeleton form from the Schwarzenegger and Dark Castle episodes. Other characters include Mike and the Bullshit Man. Each of these characters all have different abilities as well. The nerd's main method of attacks is his Nintendo Zapper as well as a power glove. The guitar guy fires projectiles at a much longer distance and could also fire projectiles through walls while the nerd cannot. Mike carries a lightsaber and can also see through blocks that obstruct hidden areas. The Bullshit Man can double jump using his diarrhea and fire shite out of his hands. He is the most powerful character in the game in terms of damage he can deal. Unfortunately, I missed my chance to grab Bullshit Man during my playthrough, and now that I think of it, he would have been very helpful for one or two bosses I was having trouble with. You can even collect different power-ups as well, including the Glitch Gremlin, which freezes everything on screen including hazards, and Super Mecha Death Christ, which wipes the entire screen clear of all enemies. You collect health by picking up beer bottles, a nod to his infatuation with Rolling Rock, and you can pass through checkpoints that take the form of the Nintoaster, yet another AVGN reference. Common hazards include spikes, lasers, fire, death blocks, among others. There is so much to wrap around here, but basically this is a very well made, albeit incredibly difficult, platformer, but despite its difficulty, it's very forgiving. There are plenty of checkpoints and you have unlimited continues if you play on normal or lower. My only complaint was I ran into a bug during the snow level where I got stuck at the edge of the screen and couldn't proceed to the stage boss. Thankfully, the game doesn't force you to play the game in a linear fashion, and you can select any level you want and beat the game in whatever order suits you. So if a level is becoming frustrating or a nuisance, you can always try another level and come back to it later, but you have to beat all levels in order to unlock the final level. Knowing this, I couldn't let the aforementioned bug go that I was experiencing earlier, so I tried again and the exact same thing happened. Thankfully, I found a thread where I noticed I wasn't alone. This was a known bug that appeared to only affect those with a higher refresh rate. Since my display is 144Hz, I had to change it back to 60Hz, and now it works, and I was able to continue to the boss and finish the level. As I said earlier on, this game is full of references, including Easter eggs, cameos. It would be unfair for me to show them all here, so if you're a fan of AVGN and happen to be a fan of retro games, then this is absolutely one you should definitely give a try. After my playthrough, I died almost 250 times. It's safe to say that Angry Video Game Nerd Adventures is a solid platformer that's incredibly difficult, but also fair. Considering this was the remastered version I played, I understand this one would have been different to the original version. I also played the game on normal difficulty purely for the sake of my sanity. This game requires a lot of concentration and to some extent some stellar reflexes. I know I said Wonder Boy on the Master System required the same thing, but with AVGN there was the added stress of firing weapons, avoiding death blocks, enemies and other hazards on top of it. Having said that, I had a lot of fun. AVGN Adventures is a top-notch side-scroller and I highly recommend it. It looks stunning, the pixel art is top-notch and the game is overall lovingly crafted from start to finish, and I really enjoyed it. The follow-up was titled Angry Video Game Nerd 2 ASSIMILATION, and as previously stated was released 3 years after the original game. Obviously, since I'm playing the deluxe edition, there were changes made. Originally, it had a number of references to the AVGN movie, with characters such as General Dark Onward, Death Motzitz, and the alien appearing in the game. These were removed and changed into different characters because the developers wanted both games to have a continuous and coherent story. This was also one of 2 reasons as to why Fred Fox was brought back for the sequel. The other reason was the original version had Nostalgia Critic being included, but due to licensing issues he was removed and replaced by Fred in the deluxe edition. A few other changes were made, but overall the game remains the same as it was. AVGN II takes place after the events of the original game. All the characters are minding their own business when a laser beam strikes Earth and, unlike the original game, where they were transported into a shitty game, the entire world is now a shitty game, and everyone is transformed into different creatures. The game opens up with the nerd waking up in his room. Mike arrives and escapes his transformation to warn the nerd what has happened, and from here on, the game begins. Well, not before a quick tutorial. One major feature introduced is the ability to collect upgrades for the nerd to utilise. The first upgrade you get are the grip loafers. These allow you to stick to walls in order to climb them or to slide down them, similar to what you do in Ninja Gaiden. At the end of the tutorial you meet Fred Fox again, and he tells you that he is trying to pick up pieces of a flux capacitor. After a brief mini-boss battle, you finish the tutorial level and you are brought to a new overworld screen that heavily resembles the overworld you see on Super Mario Bros. 3. The idea is the same. You can complete the levels in any order you wish, but the difference in this one is that each level now contains 3 stages, with a boss battle being the 4th, and are also themed after different video games and nerd episodes including Monster Madness, Board James, Ninja Gaiden, Ninja Turtles, and even the Virtual Boy gets heavily referenced to the point where the entire level is black and red. There are a hell of a lot more that I could mention. I'd be here all day if I acknowledged every little reference and Easter egg this game had to offer. If you manage to complete a level without dying, you get a gold icon after the stage is over. Complete a level with a death or more and it'll just be a regular one, so at least you'll know which ones you still have left should you attempt a perfect run on all levels. God, that would be a challenge and a half. And speaking of challenges, the collectibles, which are still the NES cartridges, are now double than what they were in the original game and are much more challenging to obtain. These were often the reason I'd spend way too long on a level that was Did I mention this game was challenging? Oh yeah, take a look at this. Well, that was simple. At least I can now play as Board James. Was it worth it? Why don't you ask my poor hands? Like, this wasn't the only time I died so much trying to get all the collectibles. It happened a lot. There was even one time where I spent 6 minutes trying to get just 2 NES cartridges that were only 1 screen apart. What made it horrible is that both these areas were equally as stressful to bypass. I mean, look at this! This is one of a few interesting mechanics thrown in. When you jump on the switch, the force of gravity changes. It ended up becoming very confusing and increasingly frustrating, especially when I had to time my jumps through these portals while avoiding lasers. How could it be worse? Oh, how about this? How about instead of switches that change gravity, how about gravity changing the moment you jump? Try doing that while avoiding spikes, death blocks, and trying to get collectibles. It's murder on the hands. It's murder on my psyche, and it's murder on my temperature. Oh yeah, temperature. I was trying to do this while my location was suffering a heatwave. How I was able to 100% this game, I'll never know. I normally don't have that level of patience or hell, skill to tackle a game like this, but I did it, and I have to say it was pretty damn fun despite the frustrations. What you saw was only one segment of a much larger game. If it wasn't for the collectibles, I would probably be less frustrated. So at least the game essentially told me that in order to get the extra stuff, you'll have to work a little bit harder, and I appreciate that about this. It's damn hard, but it's equally damn fun. There is a lot of satisfaction to be had for overcoming difficult obstacles in games like these, and I can truly see the appeal. There were a couple of moments that I can recall where even the game itself told me, look, we get it. This was ridiculous back then, I'm not going to make you go through it now. Such as the time where you have to re-experience the electric kelps from Ninja Turtles on the NES. A simple stomp on a switch completely turns them off in this game, and makes the rest of the level less ridiculous. Another moment was during a boss fight against Dracula, where he mutated into 4 extra forms before the nerd himself basically said, fuck this, and ended the level. I love how much this game breaks the fourth wall, and it does it a lot. I mentioned earlier that you can now collect upgrades that are scattered throughout the game. As a result, you can no longer select different characters in order to use different abilities, but this has been replaced by the option to select different skins that you unlock. In order to unlock every skin though, you have to collect a certain amount of NES cartridges throughout your playthrough. Unlocking all of them will allow you to get every skin. The skins are purely cosmetic, and you'll still have all of your abilities no matter which one you choose. The nerd is the only character that you can visibly see change appearance once you collect an upgrade, ultimately taking the form of a very familiar getup, the Super Nerd armour of course. You can even upgrade your weapon to the Super Scope, or Uber Scope as it's called here, which does more damage than the Zapper. Other upgrades include the Power Glove for punching through walls, the Turbo Pad for charging your weapon, the Power Pad for gliding, and the Swearing Scout 9001, which allows you to see invisible platforms. It's up to you which order you go through the levels and what upgrade you want to get first. For example, if you want to get the Super Scope, you have to make sure that you have the helmet and the Power Glove beforehand, as you will have to use invisible platforms and punch through a wall in order to reach it. That being said, if you're going for all of them, at least you'll be fully upgraded by the time you reach the final chapter. But if you're curious as to what upgrades you still need to get, you can always consult the pause screen, which now shows what you currently have in your possession. It's not only upgrades that were brought into this installment. A new secondary weapon was introduced too. Now you can use bombs which explode on impact, but you have to be careful not to be too close to the blast radius however, as doing that will result in instant death. AVGN I may have been a passion project created by AVGN fans in the guise of a 2D platformer, but AVGN II is the ultimate love letter to not only fans of Cinemassacre, but fans of video games and movies old and new. So much fan service is brought in as well, from the fourth wall breaking dialogue to a plenitude of cameos and Easter eggs, whether you're a fan of Godzilla, Star Wars, Dracula, or even My Neighbor Totoro. Yes, not even Totoro is safe from this game. What a fucking legend! Even so, there's something for everyone here. It's not just a difficult 2D platformer, it's a fair, challenging game that had a lot of love put into it, just like the first game, and I am more than honoured to have been able to experience it. As a huge fan of AVGN and Cinemassacre as a whole, and despite both these games being almost a decade old combined, they were two of the best games I played in 2021, and I wish I played them sooner. I was able to beat AVGN II in just over 2 hours, and I died a little more times than in the first game. But you're damn right I'm going to pin the blame on that one level that killed me 68 fucking times. All just so I could get a couple of fucking letters. Nevertheless, this was amazing. It was the first game, but massively improved and then some. It's exactly how a sequel should be done. Oh, and speaking of sequels, again, we're not finished. there's still one more to talk about. Created especially for this deluxe edition, there was one extra chapter added to the game that could only be played if you beat the first 2 games. It follows the nerd discovering a floating castle controlled by an unknown adversary. The nerd decides to approach this castle, and it's here we're presented with one extra chapter comprising of 4 final levels. This is AVGN Tower of Torment, the final chapter. So who was the final boss for this chapter? Pfft, I'm not telling you. You're going to have to find out for yourself, or just look it up on YouTube if you're that eager. But what the game is basically an extra chapter for AVGN 2, with all your upgrades available from the beginning. Without spoiling it, I will say this chapter does star one particular character that has been fairly prominent on AVGN episodes over the years and heavily referenced, yet never made one single appearance in the first 2 games. Who could it be? Like I said, I'm not telling. It doesn't do anything too special, except add a few more challenging levels to complete, cartridges to collect, and more enemies to shoot, including the return of the giant claw from the first game, which appears in what can only be described as a complete rip-off of the drawbridge section of Dragon's Lair, which I briefly showed at the start of the video, and is infamous for how ridiculously, unforgivingly difficult and unfair it is. And there is also a level that includes the truck from Big Rigs, which is probably the most nerve-wracking level in the entire game. There was something uneasy about panickingly jumping to high platforms while that light got brighter and brighter, and it was made even worse when the truck started zooming by even faster. My hands almost locked up entirely doing this level in particular. It was so intense. Tower of Torment was this collection's one more thing before you turned it off, and in my opinion it was a great ending. I do hope there is a 3rd instalment. In conclusion, AVGN I II Deluxe is a superlative collection of 2D platformers that are made for fans like me. I have been watching Cinemassacre since 2007, and this collection of games is just icing on a cake that comprises an assortment of incredibly entertaining videos by a very likeable team of creators. Whether it's AVGN, Monster Madness, Bored James, Rental Reviews, James and Mike, or just an opinion piece from James Rolfe himself, there is always something worthwhile to watch. What makes this even better is they have a new podcast series called the Cinemassacre podcast, which, by the time you're watching this, has already started. I would not be making videos today if it wasn't for Cinemassacre, AVGN specifically. As I said, it was Jedi1 who gave me the idea to start making videos, but it was AVGN that inspired me to put more time and effort into it. I could have made a Cinemassacre appreciation video years ago if I wanted to, but now that I think of it, I'm glad I waited until I played both these games, because reviewing games is what I do best here on GB Gaming. And this couldn't have been done any better. And speaking of which, if you managed to make it this far into the review, then thank you very, very much. It's no secret that I do not do these videos for anything other than the pleasure of doing it time and time again. It's time consuming but personally rewarding to me, and anything else that comes with it is a bonus. So basically, the games are fantastic, brilliant, solid 2D platformers that are incredibly fun to play from start to finish. I enjoyed it front to back, and if it wasn't for the AVGN, I would not be making videos today, I would not be as big a fan as I am, and I wouldn't even have bothered to play these games. So, James Rolfe, should you, in the most unlikeliest of chances, come across this video, then please just take this message from me personally. Thank you very, very much. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this. I really wouldn't. with that being said, if you enjoyed watching this, then you know what to do. And thanks again for watching. This has been Dave talking to you on GB Gaming, where video games come first. And I'll see you whenever I see you. Stay safe and cheerio. Goodbye.